I don't make it a secret anymore. All of the ugly, traumatic things that I have been through throughout the course of my life, but specifically from the time I was a young mother. Okay, 24 years old, had my first child. He is now almost 30. And even though it's not hard for me to speak about these things, what is hard for me is that sometimes we don't see the pattern. Yeah. And if we don't see the pattern, we cannot fix the pattern. And so today's video is about being able to see the pattern in the astrology chart. Okay, trauma trauma will be shown there. It comes from certain aspects like a conjunction. That's a big word for eclipsing. Okay, so if you were to look at anybody's chart and you see that there are two planets in the same sign real close together, like 3 degrees, that's a conjunction. That's two planets eclipsing. And so that's going to cause some tension, especially if the two planets and signs that rule those two planets don't get along. And more so if those two planets are in a house ruled by a planet that neither of those get along with. Okay, and then there's a square, which is it's 90 degrees apart. And the energy that is caused by a square will bring a lot of challenges. And sometimes those challenges include being a victim of somebody else's madness, yeah? And then, of course, there's the other big one. It's an opposition, where you get two planets directly across from each other. And I think people are real big about, oh, opposites attract, this and that. Oh, real cute, you folks, but it's not always that way, right? So today I'm going to talk about that, and also the planets that would cause some challenges if they were opposite each other, or even like we can say like Bonnie and Clyde working together, yeah. So in the chart, right, everybody will tell you, oh, Neptune is the planet of imagination. Of course it is. Of course it is. But there's the other side of that, where we can be delusional and deceive ourselves, and even to the point where we want to believe those things that we're told so much, or we want to believe what we're thinking so much that it will cause us to fall into addiction when we don't get those things, or the pain is too much. You got to do something. When we lie to ourselves, pretty much, okay, that's Neptune at work in our charts. And I like to tell people not to fool themselves, just to look at things as they are, which then I get a lot of grief about. But you're a Pisces. I'm a Pisces that's been through a lot of shit. And a Pisces with a very stable moon, like I said in a couple videos ago, or maybe even my last video. I have a Taurus moon, okay, which I'm going to get to in a minute. All right, so either the abuser or the abused could have this Neptune thing there. In the case of the abused, again, the deception, the illusion, you got to go and do something to take away the pain. And on the other side, the jackass, well, Neptune is very prominent in the charts of narcissists. Why? Because they live in a world of deception and illusions, and they like to create it to the point where their victim, their source of supply, becomes an addiction for them. Okay, and I'm not going to say most abusers. I'm going to say damn nearly all of them. They're addicted to that feeling of power, and along with that feeling of power comes from where? Pluto. Okay, because Pluto is all about power and control and obsession. Okay, how would that come out? What would that look like, Inti? Well, an abuser becomes obsessed with their victim. They become obsessed with the stories that they go tell themselves that their victim, deserves this because, you know, the abuser thinks and believes their insanity, their own insanity caused by their own thoughts, not only of what this other person is doing that they don't like, or they're not doing it, but that's what the abuser thinks that they're doing it, right? But on the other side of that, there is the obsession and the need to control their own foul thoughts about themselves, which comes out of their mouths, out of their action onto other people, but specifically their main target. Okay. The other thing that nobody thinks about when they're reading a chart is Uranus. It's a planet of quick change, and abusers are quick change artists, and by that I mean they can go from sunny skies to stormy bullshit now, and they really like to cause chaos. Chaos is the milieu of Uranus. Some people call it Uranus, whatever. I call them Uranus. But Uranus, like I just said, is a planet that causes quick change. So I have been there in that kind of energy where 1 minute could be the kid's father, right? Could have been my sister, could have been one of my aunties, but 1 minute they're nice, bang, next minute I'm Satan. That's me, okay? And usually when I've looked at charts, I noticed that the person who the chaos is being done to, who is being brought this trauma, has some very heavy signs, very important signs in their charts, usually a personal sign, right? When one that is also a personal planet with that sign. Again, I'm going to use me as the example. I get Mars and Moon and Saturn all in Taurus. Okay, so because I have that heavy energy, Saturn is usually the person who is being victimized. Okay, and why do I say that? Because you think about this way, yeah. Saturn is the planet of restriction. In a marriage, when both parties are all there and front and center in that marriage, responsibility, not just to the other person but to your own self, becomes a big thing. Okay, becomes huge. And so since it is the planet that is, like I said, restriction, in other words, creating boundaries, all right, where you're very responsible for everything you say and do and all that kind, and you have this killer sense of self-discipline where some things you might not, but certain important things, especially where the moon is involved, that self-discipline is going to click in, and you're going to want to sit there and try to do everything you possibly can to get this other person to notice what you're doing, who you are, how much you're putting in, how much work you are doing towards not so much being part of this union, this relationship, whatever, but how much you are willing to put there. An abuser will push your Saturn to the point of restriction. Okay, forget about boundaries. Point of restriction, especially if you have a malleable planet as the sun, which I do. I have Pisces. It's very. We're not shifty like people say we are. We are mutable, meaning we can change easily. And I'm not going to even go there and say there are no Piscean people who are not abusive, because there very well are. My grandfather, who I share a birthday with, I like believing, and sometimes I even know because I've seen my family charts. I know that I was born to break that pattern, but in order for me to break that abusive pattern, I had to go through it myself, right? So that I could see, oh, what's tutu? this bugger. No kidding. Okay, and then there's other things. There's placements that show you in the chart the possibility for trauma, like a big one, right? My mom, I'm not going to say, I'm not going to repeat what she told me, but when you have moon in Scorpio, those people, I'm not saying everybody who's got a moon in Scorpio, they've probably either experienced emotional or physical abuse. There is a huge, gigantic, deep well filled with feelings of this horrible insecurity that they just cannot shake. And based on the rest of the chart is how that's going to come out. And the way that it happened to my mom, right? Because she's boomer age, and prior to her, my grandparents is Pluto in Cancer, right? And if you don't know what that means, go and study the generations. Pluto in Cancer, Pluto in Leo, I am Pluto in Virgo. That's beside the point. My mother's generation had such high hopes for themselves, and it feels like they had everything handed to them, which they kind of did. But at the same time, they were not able to just state, this person is doing nasty things to me. Because why? Their parents were not listening. They did not want to hear that. You don't go and shake up, the family groove thing. You just, everybody got to shut up. Okay. And that, that tends to come out in later generations. It sure came out in me. Not the same way abuse happened to her. It happened to me in that I was an abused spouse, and luckily I'm this power already. I can talk about it, right? The other, there's other things there, such as eighth house. Eighth house is ruled by Scorpio and Pluto, and when you have Neptune there, all right, because of the Scorpio factor there, it's a good chance that they have experienced some kind of, SA. And I don't mean homeboys, but, that's besides the point. Abuse of the dirtiest kind. And from that abuse, as I know this from my, people I coach, there are always going to be these hardcore, real deep-seated in the bones of the soul, even of shame and guilt, and that's it's a huge betrayal, because usually somebody who's going to assault you in that manner is somebody, 9 times out of 10 is somebody that was trusted. And well, for those of us who trusted somebody, one other person, or maybe plenty other persons, to have it be that they would violate and betray that trust, that's like coming up behind and punking somebody from, the back, and then go tell everybody, oh, well, they deserved it. How are you going to deserve that kind of crap? You're not, right? And then, of course, when you go through these kind of things, there are certain there's certain things that happen in your mind, right? And for plenty of people who have been through what I've been through, domestic violence, what lots of people in my family been through, on one side, really bad, and then the other side, it's really bad no matter what. On both sides, one was more physical than the other one, and the other one was more emotional than the first one. And what that does, okay, if you have, if Mars and Pluto are somehow involved in all of that, in those aspects, you have to remember that Mars is an action planet, and Mars is our level of aggression. And in some people, when it's in close quarters, in close aspect, or in any kind aspect with Pluto, which is, remember I said it, plutonium, plutonic, Pluto. Pluto is a change maker. Pluto is also, again, ruled by Scorpio. And Scorpio is the sign that is all about what? Death and transformation. So when you have, that in the mix, it can come out as actual violence, as, this complete, total destruction of a person. And I don't mean only as a person physically, but who they are is dearly affected. So to anybody who has looked to astrology to figure out what your trip is and how come you keep getting, fucked with, you keep getting harmed, my greatest apologies. I got nothing but love for you folks, because I have been there. It took me a very long time, just to be able to trust my own self, so that I could trust this man who I absolutely love and adore. Sometimes I love this brother more than I love to breathe, and he knows it. And in kind, he shows me that he also loves me. And the only reason I would put that in there is because once you have not so much decided to choose yourself, that's hurtful. Once it is that you have figured out how it is that you plan to heal, okay, all of these things that are all about what I just spoke about become front and center, become very important for a person who's been through that, to figure out not so much how to get rid of it, because you cannot ever get rid of what has happened to you, but you can always do really great things with it all, because it's, in that sense, you were learning how to survive. Not only this person who materialized in your life and brought all of these things that other people told you from the time you was a small kid, okay? That person is the one who, through that horribleness, through that dishonoring, through that disrespect, through that deception and the lying and all those things that I just talked about, once you are once you're finished, once you've gone from that situation and it becomes clear and you are able to get a hold of you and love you, you begin to be able, again, through your planets, through all these things that you've gone through, you begin to heal. And you know when you are better. You know when you are finally okay. Maybe not all the way, but you know that you are okay. That's when, your 10th house comes right into play, because, yeah, if you're an abuse victim, turn survivor, turn thriver, turn healer and mentor. You begin to understand that the reason why you went through that was not so that you could survive it only, but also so that you could be the hiccup in the shotgun. You could be the one who went, I am not going further with this family crap of victimization, which that part doesn't come until far later, and you will know when it's there. But that's what I have to tell you about planets and signs just a little bit about victims and victimizers and how you can find them in the chart. If you like no more, send me an email. And thank you for watching. And I'm glad you're okay. And I'm glad I'm okay too. I'll see you next time.